talk to Sam.
Oh, okay.
Some strange person that got somebody wondering. We had a fob to get in.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought the door was locked this morning when I came in, so thought we were safe.
Is Tasha joining us today? Jill, do you know?
Yes, she should be.
Oh, okay. Give her another minute or two here. Or maybe she's here. Leslie, Ellen, Annette, Brian, Chris. No, Tasha.
So I have 17 panelists and one public attendee. Ms. Van Vossen is here as an attendee.
Okay.
For attendance, Leslie, I think you as co-host can see the participant list for your minutes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let me double check the Zoom computer before we get started, Carl.
Well, I was hoping that we don't have Tasha on yet.
Okay.
We'll give her another minute or two here. That's all right with everybody?
Well, if her Zoom's going as smoothly as the ones down here have gone today, it may be a while.
Joey up and running?
Yep, we're good to go whenever you're ready. If you want to start with just 3.
Well, why don't we? Because we got a lot to get through today. So we'll call the meeting to order. It's Thursday, January 20th, 2022. It's 3 minutes after 12. This is the regular monthly board meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. We have 3 board members present, so we have a quorum. And we hope our 4th will join us. We know Nancy will not be here. So let's begin with the November 18th, 2021 regular board minutes. Regular board meeting minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Ruth has moved. Melanie, will you second it?
Second it.
Okay. Any additional discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That motion passes unanimously. Public comments and announcements. Anything? Well, golly. We extend our best to Leslie with the passing of her mom, and then I think you all know that Van Dyke passed away. And so Nancy will not be joining us today, and of course, our thoughts are with her and her family at this time.
Thank you, Carl.
And don't pretend to be very good at this, but That's enough said, I guess, for now. Anything else? If not, Jill, first action item is the fiscal year 2021 audit report.
Yes, so we have AZ staff on the Zoom meeting to present their report to the board. I see Will is here, and Will, you can turn on your video if you have video. If not, oh, there he is. And I'm not sure if Jan's joining us. Oh, there she is. Yep, I'm sure Jan's coming in too. So we had a clean audit again this year, and everything worked really great. And so I'll just turn it over to AZ staff.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe evident, but I am working from home. I have two little ones home with me, so I apologize in advance if anyone comes running or screaming into the room. So maybe they'll join us today. So obviously, my name is Will Parnell. I'm a manager with Anderson's Remuelin, and I had the opportunity to in charge the financial statement audit in FY21. Here with me today is Jan Schweitzer, the signing partner for this engagement. And before we dive into some required discussion, I just want to give a big thanks to the staff at MRA and everyone involved in the engagement this year. As usual, they were very professional, helpful, and resourceful during this 100% remote engagement. So 2 years in a row now that we did not perform any field work on site, and it was still a very smooth engagement. Jill and her team were very organized and provided all the support and documentation that we requested electronically. So big thanks. It's a big change from prior years. Moving on to the opinion, the FY21 audit was conducted to review the agency's financial statements to ensure that they are accurate and in compliance with accounting regulations. In our opinion, the financial statements in all material respects are in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. So kind of moving on to some of those required discussion topics, there was no significant presentation changes or new accounting pronouncements adopted in fiscal year 21. We noted no transactions entered into by the agency during the year for which there is a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. All significant transactions have been recognized in the financial statements in the proper period. Accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements prepared by management and are based on management's knowledge and experience about past and current events and assumptions about future years. The most sensitive estimates affecting the agency's financial statements were management's estimate of the other post-employment benefit liability, commonly known as OPEB, and management's estimate of the net pension liability, or PERS. The disclosures of those two aforementioned items can be located in the notes to the financial statements at note 7 and note 10, respectively. We encountered no significant difficulties or disagreements in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. Additionally, as it relates to financial accounting, reporting, and other audit matters, there was no disagreements with management. Professional standards require us to accumulate all known and likely misstatements identified during the audit, other than those that are clearly trivial, and communicate them to the appropriate level of management. Happy to announce that there was no such misstatements noted. Again, during the segment, we just kind of hit on these required discussion topics. We won't get into the details of the financial statements unless you folks have any specific questions. Again, there was really no significant changes in the presentation of these financial statements as compared to prior year. But with that, I'll leave it open for questions.
Questions from anyone? Well, it sounds like we've made your job kind of easy. No big changes in accounting standards, and you got Jill. I mean,
Yeah, and I
We
know I
love it.
discussed some upcoming changes or pronouncements, and you know, either with folks on the board or certainly with Jill throughout field work, kind of provide that list either in advance of field work or during field work. And you know, right now it doesn't look like there's anything that would be kind of direct in material. So good.
okay. Ruth.
Not a question, just a comment. Well, two comments. One, of course, thanks to Jill and others on the staff for another great audit report, but also to AZ and Will and Jan, that I appreciate the narrative that goes into this and the clear explanations of why revenues might be up or expenses might be up, and how that translates from year to year. And to the extent that the public reads this, I think that was really well done. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? I have to be reminded of this every year, but we have to vote to accept the audit. Is that correct, Jill or Ellen?
That's the action that you typically take, yes.
Okay. Ruth,
I'll move to accept this audit report.
Melanie, a second?
I will second it.
Okay, any discussion or any public comments? Joe, anybody raising their hand?
No, I think, but I do have Natasha. Natasha is, let me elevate her to a panelist, and then yes, I think she might comment, either that or let me get her in before you take that vote.
All right.
Multitasking here.
There she is. Hi, Tasha.
Apologies for being delayed. I have listened, but I was in the audience, so to speak. I don't have a comment. I appreciate it.
All right. So we have a motion to accept or approve. What's the right?
Accept.
The audit report. It's been seconded. There appears to be no additional comments from anyone. So with that, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Will and Jan, thank you very much. And
Thank you so much.
I know that this isn't something that you auditors hear a lot, but we look forward to seeing you.
We as well. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take care.
So-
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. 124 North Higgins Avenue, Annette. And
Yes. And Brian and Karen.
Brian and Karen.
Let's see. So back in it was our last meeting. As you recall, the board approved a proceed without prejudice for the Sippies doing business as Apple Lane to begin deconstruction on the structure at 124 North Higgins Street. And they have since finalized a TIF application for the deconstruction / demolition work, and for some improvements in the right-of-way, sidewalk, curb, gutter, and pedestrian scale lighting and bike racks. And the request is $94,000, the total request, $94,611, $61,468 for the deconstruction demolition work, $33,143 for the public right-of-way improvements. And staff is recommending approval of that request. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Karen and Brian to further explain what they're proposing, and they can go into much greater detail. Staff feels like it's a very exciting project. And
Well, welcome, you two.
And
Thank
if
you.
you'd like me to share my screen, Brian and Karen, I can do that. I have the images that were attached to the memo, so just let me know how you want me to proceed.
Oh,
Brian, I'll let you take it.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the extension. In December, we were able to get into the property at 124 North Higgins, December 1, and begin our deconstruction and demolition with Wasteless Works. They have been able to recycle and resell as much as they can. And again, part of our intention of the build out is to use some reclaimed materials from the Merck glass and from some local reclaimed lumber for our flooring. An update, the M store was able to make a successful move down to Higgins and Broadway and have been able to launch there as scheduled, and they're still flushing out their Apple store entrance on Higgins, but the M store and all the Grizz gear has been up and running and doing very well, actually. As far as where we are with MMW and Western Interstate Construction, we have our design excellence review completed and permitting done. All of our permitting for right-of-way work is underway. So I think we're ready to improve some blight and bring a beautiful kind of heritage building to downtown and increase our tax base. So I don't know if there's any specific questions or if anybody would like to look at any images. One of the things we've tried to do is with all the efforts that were made to preserve the historic pharmacy part of the Mercantile, we're basically going to try to emulate the R.H. McKay Art Company that used to sit on the corner of 120 North Higgins before it's burned, and bring it basically over as a facade enhancement to the 124 property. So downtown on those four kind of main corners of Higgins and Main and Front, we should kind of have a nice aesthetic of kind of a throwback to kind of early architecture of Missoula, and hopefully a nice mix of our contemporary gallery at 120 combined with the historic elements. So that's kind of where we are. Everything's moving forward. We don't have any major hiccups with supply chain, so I think our timeline looks good too.
Karen, did you have anything to add?
I don't. Unless you all wanted to see the image, I don't know. I wasn't able to be at the last meeting, and so I wasn't sure what you all were able to see. And I don't know if you saw the image of the facade that we're working on. I'm just ecstatic to have a new facade downtown. I have not been very silent about how I have felt about that old facade. So I'm really, really excited about updating that new facade in a heritage look. So we're really, really excited about this project.
One last little feel-good note. We did find the original papers from drawings from 1974 for the Gentry Men's Store. 1972 for the Gentry's Men's Store, showing the barrel and everything being designed out. And before we really get into any kind of remodeling, Karen's worked with the university. Was it the anthropology maybe?
Yeah, Kelly Dixon and her anthropology students are going to actually be coming down tomorrow morning to see the basement. They haven't had access to this building yet. Her student, Nikki Manning, wrote the Historic Underground Missoula book, and I forgot to have it when they came and looked at 120. They hadn't had access to 120 either. So they were able to see that basement before we deconstructed the diner there. And I called Kelly and I said, have you seen 124 basement? And they haven't. So they're all going to come tomorrow morning and take a look. And I'm really interested because there's some funny like bricked in windows down in the basement, and I'm really fascinated to see what they say about it. But apparently Nikki is working on her PhD, and there will be a follow-up Historic Underground Missoula book. But yeah, so we're having great fun.
So is the relic going in there? Is that the plan?
That's the intention. Radius is going to expand into the 600 square feet that Relic was using in the 120 building. They've expanded their staff to deal with this space. And so the 120 building will be vibrant and being used by Radius. And in the basement, I still have the art vault business. And then 124, we're still in negotiating, but Relic will be the foundation. And we're trying to bring some other arts maybe into there, like some textiles and maybe some jewelry. So we're still working with some other artisans and makers to try to figure it out. But that will be it'll be arts driven retail.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Melanie.
I don't think we saw the rendering when you came in December. It was just a quick proceed without prejudice. The rendering that's in this memo, that what looks like is a bike rack, that's not the actual bike rack, is it? Or is that just a placeholder?
Okay, so on that particular rendering
Annette, will you pull it up?
So that picture is not quite exactly accurate, but it's pretty close. So
Okay.
I can describe it when it comes up.
There we go. That's the one you're talking about, Mel?
Yeah, so there you go. One more little click up on that, just one more little, there you go. So the bike rack, those black posts are actually bike racks. They have little bicycles stamped on them. Your lock goes through the middle of it and the bikes can be put on either side. So those are bike racks that I found in Seattle about 5 years ago, and we brought them in front of 120 North Higgins. So it will be a continuation of basically two that we already have there and here. And they're kind of that flat black that matches all of our trim. And they have a bicycle on them. I've said that, but it's important because they don't, again, look traditional. The silver galvanized bike rack, that's coming out. That's what's currently there, is one of the old galvanized archways. And basically that single will be removed and two posts will be there. The only other difference on the facade here is the little sconces on each side. We've decided to not do outside lighting, so that those lights won't be there, but everything else is accurate.
And is the purple, is that the old?
Yeah, the
That's
purple.
the glass from the Merc?
You got it. That little purple accent, just like above Basil and like above Planck, a few places that have been able to recycle some. Same kind of idea. Same idea. We were able to recover some of the glass back from Philip. It had made its way over to Anaconda area, and then some was still in town here.
Wow, good for you, Brian. Karen.
And then the same heritage timber, Gary and Becky out in Potomac, they're going to do our floors. They feel that they've been able to source a similar lot of the 120, so we should have a pretty good idea what the floor is going to look like too. So,
but in terms of the exterior, then the piece from the Merc is the glass above the.
Right, exactly. So Carl, physically how that works is that glass is in its current form are in these little frames that you can kind of almost envision there that are about 4 foot by 3 foot. So basically I use a little Dremel and I cut those little 4x4 squares out of the old kind of leaded zinced holders. We clean them all up and get the soot off of them. And then I can actually treat them with a UV light and make them a little bit more purple. And so, and then we reframe them into a zinc frame using a local glass artist named Amy. And then she'll build us basically our framed out panels that then will be installed by our construction people on site with a little wood frame.
Wow.
So that's what it entails to recycle those.
Okay, if I have questions, I'll ask Ruth how that works.
That's impressive. I'm glad you were able to do that, Brian. What a fun project, but on its own.
Right.
And well, this doesn't really have anything to do with your request for MRA funding, but I am curious, will there be an internal access from one business to the other? Or would you have to go outside to access them?
Okay.
Curious.
So I think the question is, are we going to link these buildings
Yeah.
internally? And the short and long answer of that is we have no intention of doing it on the main floor, but we may put a connection in the basement
Huh?
as a safety egress for both buildings, basically. You know, the
Okay.
configuration of the buildings is they're these long kind of 105-foot shotgun buildings. And even though we're code compliant on egress, the reality is that you might have a long ways to go from one end of the building to the other. And we've been thinking about using a door just as a emergency egress for both sides, but we haven't decided on that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And then Brian, what is your schedule?
Yes, sir. Right now, we're planning on pouring the concrete that needs to be poured next week. That basically the old barrel facade was not built to hold the weight of glass and brick. So what we're dealing with, essentially why we kind of have to get into the building a little bit, is literally the lateral walls would not have held any facade that wasn't just made out of light wood. So we're basically putting in a steel moment frame that will kind of be hidden within the storefront. And the moment frame will basically give us our lateral support to hold up this facade. And so since we had to do that anyway, we basically went through the first floor down into the basement, drilled conical set posts, and now are going to pour like an H of concrete there to create this frame. Then the frame will be kind of built up to support us laterally. And again, since we kind of had to take the roof off a little bit up front to deal with that moment frame, we decided to kind of use the heritage look and feel and go ahead and go up to that 13, 14-foot deck.
Wow.
And so when you walk in the building, you'll have some of that sensation you get when you walk in some of the older buildings in town, that you have a vaulted, ceiling.
So you're ready to pour concrete next week? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's coming next week. We were hoping to get the UM students in there before we poured the concrete, and I think we just did it. So that concrete will set up for about a week, and then the facade will be ready to be supported. So I hope to start ripping into this thing in about 2 weeks.
Wow. And then how long do you think you're going to be?
Oh, and then hopefully, again, our builders think they've come up with an ingenious solution to try to fight the weather and the snow this La Nina winter. We think that we can go ahead and go up high, start removing the membrane and almost rolling it back, and kind of build the roof on top of the old deck, and then take the old deck off as we go. And I think it's really going to work. And so I believe that's going to speed us up because of fighting weather. So I'm hopeful for sometime in June, and certainly July 1. I would love to see a May into June combo, but I think I can really say July 1 with some assurance.
Wow. Good for you. Well, thank you. Anything else from anybody?
I did want to thank Annette for taking us on as a new staff member and kind of catching up to our past project and how we're trying to synthesize this all kind of together. And I thought the report was beautiful. I want to use that word simpatico more often. And so thank you very much, Annette.
Okay. Mel?
I just wanted to say your personal involvement in the project is so refreshing and exciting. We don't often get to see the actual owner of the project who has and hear the vision. To hear you're personally cleaning that glass and involved is commendable. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It does bring it closer to your heart too, right?
And it's very satisfying to get that soot off of those glass pieces. Oh, it just feels so good.
Thank you, Melanie.
All right. Anything else from anybody? Any additional questions? If not, is there a motion?
Could I first make a couple of comments? I also noticed the use of simpatico, and I thought it was very appropriate. And also I wanted to say thank you for the memo cover sheet that really makes it very concise and clear, and also specifically calls out how this helps to meet the goals of the city, and not not just the MRA, that we really are striving to meet the goals that the city has set. So I appreciate that memo cover sheet. And finally, yes, I'll move to approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion or anybody want to make a public comment? Jill, anybody's hands raised?
Carl, this is Leslie.
Yes, Leslie.
We had a public comment come in, and so I'll just read that aloud if that's okay.
You bet.
This is from John Wolverton, and it's regarding the bike racks at 124 North Higgins. He writes, over $2,000 is an incredible amount of public funds for bike racks that do not function. Candlestick, as proposed, or lollipop bike rack forms are not adequate for an orderly locking of multiple bikes. And most problematically, especially for bikes with a load in a basket, they allow the front wheel of a bike to turn, and then, especially with cable locks, the bike falls over or rolls out from under itself. The common elongated A downtown bike rack designs are the most usable and preclude those issues. Additionally, they are made available through the city bike ped program at a very low expense of less than $300 installed, last I checked. Adding pricey style points to a storefront should not come at the expense of appropriately functional bicycle parking, especially in the public realm. Additionally, the white brick facade of the proposed building will clash with the darker brick and granite facades of downtown. It is the wrong color choice. End of comment.
Thank the gentleman for his comments. Any additional questions or any additional comments or questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, guys, for another good project. And of course, you're welcome to stay, but you don't need to. It sounds like you probably got some things to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really
All right.
appreciate your time.
Okay, our next item is the Scott Street redevelopment project, streets, utilities, and alley infrastructure. Ellen, you're taking this one, am I correct?
Correct.
All right.
So I'll do a brief summary of the project and what the request is. And we have Jeff Smith here from WGM Group who can answer any questions about the design and or the pricing. And also Dawn and Kai are here from Revara to answer any questions you might have. I want to do just a kind of brief background so that the public understands the context of this project. I know the board does because we've been in front of you multiple times with it. But the city purchased around approximately 19 acres located on Scott Street in 2020. The front half, or the easternmost half of that, had been cleaned up to basically DEQ and EPA residential standards. And so the city had dual interest in this property. The easternmost portion, which was cleaned up to residential standards, was envisioned to help address our housing issues in Missoula and provide a mixed use, primarily residential development in that area with neighborhood commercial, because there's certainly a deficit of that in the north side neighborhood. And we're seeing more and more housing being built in the North Reserve Scott Street area. Thank you, Jill. So this is the piece of property that the city bought. Parcel A is the 9+ acres that Revara will develop along with their partners, and the westernmost 9+ acres will be part of the city shops expansion and public works complex up there. So kind of on with the history lesson, the city ultimately decided to partner with Revara Development to move forward with this vision that we had for that property. Revara subsequently, we entered into a letter of intent between the city and Revara that really laid out the big picture items of how this relationship and partnership would work. And a couple of things the letter of intent did is and that was executed in February of last year. Some of the things that did was it required that we have a neighborhood commercial component, that there be homes that were for sale and permanently affordable in a variety of building types, and that there would be market rate multifamily housing that were priced as workforce housing to try to get some of our essential workers housed in Missoula and as opposed to outside the city, and facilities for a child care center. And this would be accomplished through the creation basically of 3 tracts of land. And Jill, if you can go to the site plan, the site plan, that would probably be helpful. So what we have is an extension of existing streets per the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan that we reestablish or establish an appropriate street grid in that area. So the streets that we're looking at are extensions of existing streets that are called for in the overall master plan, and that would be Charlo, Shakespeare, and Palmer. And what that does is the extension of Shakespeare creates the 9+ acre tract that will be part of the city shops or public works complex, and the 9+ acre tract that will be then further subdivided by the construction of Charlo Street into roughly a 3 acre piece that will house the for sale permanently affordable or permanently income qualified housing in 2 different forms, one being townhomes and one being condominiums, to achieve that pretty aggressive goal of 70 units. And the southern portion, which is around 6 acres, will be developed as the multifamily and mixed use and commercial component of this. And how we arrived at that is that one of the other conditions of the letter of intent is that Rivara engage in a very public process with the neighborhood and other interested parties to kind of determine what the form of this development would take. And what you see in front of you right now is what was the outcome of that very public process. It was a partnership between Rivara and their partners and various city departments, and was really well attended. We managed to hit a window on the front end that was not COVID restricted. So the first public meeting was an in-person meeting back in the summer and was extremely well attended. Subsequent meetings, I think, had to be done virtually because of the uptick in COVID infections in the area. So this, and this site plan, this design was a product of work from Cushing Terrell, which was formerly CTA. It was the firm that Rivara decided to engage to take us through this front end process with the public input and how that input would manifest itself on the ground and on paper. The way we will accomplish the income qualified owner occupied component of this is that land will ultimately be deeded to a community land trust, much like Clark Fort Commons, which we invested in, and Lee Gordon Place on Front Street. It's a very similar model, and the land trust, by owning the land, can control resale value on the units, which allows the owner to build some equity, but not excessive equity, and keeps these in the range of income levels that has been predetermined here. And I think it's 120 or 125. And the LOI, the letter of intent, specified that MRA would fund the public process, which we did last year, and that we would also provide the public infrastructure that's needed to create the lots, or the tracts of land. So what you have in front of you today is a request to do the engineering for the streets and utilities that are needed in order to accomplish this. We already have submitted a subdivision exemption application to the city. So the platting of the rights of ways of Shakespeare and Charlo we'll create the 3 tracts of land that will all be under separate ownership. The construction of Palmer, the extension of Palmer on the south end, is part of the design contract that we're bringing to you today, but it may not be built at the same time as Charlotte and Shakespeare, primarily because the platting and construction of Palmer has a huge impact on White Pine Park to the south. And as you've heard us say before, we've been working diligently to tie down a location for a new park. There are discussions currently going on around a piece of property further north on Scott Street, which adjacent to the Catholic cemetery up there, and really has the park in a much better location to serve the neighborhood and to serve this new development with Bellagio and the units that Dave Vigil is building to the north as part of Scott Street Village, and some other apartments that we approved funding for a couple of months ago on Otis Street. And it really lets the north side neighborhood access those locations without having to play Frogger with trucks. Right now, you've got major truck traffic between the neighborhood and the existing park. So there'll be possibly a delay in when Palmer is constructed, but we're designing all of it now to start taking it through permitting, I think probably late summer or during the summer, with hopefully permitting in hand by sometime in the fall. We've got a proposal from WGM Group, who's done basically an opinion of probable cost for the construction. It's in the neighborhood of $3.6 million. That, of course, will evolve as the design evolves and we know more about what's going on under the surface. But they have set their fee at $316,527, which gets us through bidding. So there will be a subsequent request that will come back to the board later for construction management or contract administration, which is not at all uncommon in our projects. Rivara will have the contract with WGM for the design and will manage that contract, and we will reimburse Rivara based on invoices, just like we did with the public outreach piece with Cushing Terrell. So it's a methodology that works for us and works for them, and it's pretty seamless. So the recommendation in front of you today is that you approve the funding for the engineering that's needed for the streets and utilities, and understanding that there will be subsequent funding requests that'll come back to you. And when it's time to build these streets, we'll need to issue bonds. So we'll have to come back with a request to fund the construction once we have it bid, and to make a recommendation to the council that they issue TIF revenue bonds to pay for that. And I think with that, if any of our guests have any comments, please feel free, or if the board has any questions, we'll try to answer them.
Additional, Jeff or Don or Kaya, anything additional?
We're happy to address anything you'd like, but Ellen's, I think, laid out the request in front of you.
Okay. All right, questions? So, is there, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the memo, so if somebody's raising their hands, I'm not seeing you. But, so I'll ask one at least. It seems like since the last time we discussed this project, we've reached kind of a milestone that Rivara and their partners have determined that implementation of this site plan is feasible. Am I right on that? Don?
Kai, do you want to speak to our one remaining issue on the feasibility?
Yeah, in the massing project, we learned that there wasn't a public easement on the alley between Scott Street Village and this site where the community land trust would be built. We've been working with the homeowners association there, and that they've put out an advisory vote to their members for the board that comes to a close on the 25th. And so that's the largest milestone that we have left to move through to implement what the current massing contemplates. If that's declined by that board, we have to restructure the community land trust portion. But generally speaking, as the entire site looks today, assuming we can get a public access easement, there's currently a utility access easement on that alley, but not a public access easement. And so as the site looks today, based on construction costs and all the other factors that go into it, we've checked those boxes and feel that it's time to pursue this to the next stage of kicking off construction drawings with architects in the 1st of February and proceeding with WGM on the infrastructure side of this and working through that process as well. So it was, we were really proud to find an appropriate construction partner that could tackle this with us, as well as architects and engineers. And, you know, there's always concern around construction and around all these things coming up. But the demand and the need for housing hasn't changed in this town. And we think that this has a huge role to play in solving a portion of home ownership for the 100 to 120% AMI individuals.
And I failed to mention that the alley is a part of the request for engineering and improvements. It's not, the city has agreed to assume maintenance of this if the public access easement is granted. So it will function like an alley that's platted as part of right of way, but it won't be platted. And the city will be responsible for it.
One more time, it will function.
It'll be an alley for all intents and purposes, but it'll never show up as platted, as a right-of-way, platted right-of-way. But the city has assumed responsibility for it, which is the distinction here.
What was the date when you would know the vote?
The HOA advisory vote comes to a close on the 25th of this month. The board will still need to convene after that. So we're within a short period of time.
And have you been working with them in this process? I mean, do they have?
Yeah, so yep, we held a meeting, a Zoom meeting where one of the board members attended. We held another meeting where there was board members and HOA members. And then they also held an internal meeting themselves to discuss this. And so there's been ongoing discussions since this issue was surfaced in October.
Yeah, Ruth.
Well, so what is your feeling about how that vote is going to go, and what happens if it gets denied?
You're asking me to predict an election here, which we know how that goes. And the pollsters haven't voted yet.
Yeah, but I am, because you've had those meetings with them.
Yeah, no,
so,
it's there's general concern, right, for the neighborhood. However, there's also excitement around the addition of services to, be it commercial services, the daycare, grocery store, things of those nature. And so, there's, based on conversations today, we do believe that this will get passed. We've put forth a cost sharing agreement with them because they do plow it. They do additional maintenance currently beyond what the city does. They will plow that alley. And so we've offered through the CLT, what will be the CLT HOA, essentially to enter into a cost sharing agreement for maintaining the current standard of care on that alley. And so we've put forth, economics to help with that. And generally, we believe that it'll be approved. But, that's until we can't confirm that until the end.
And
But
to answer your question, Ruth, what will happen is obviously we're going to have to reconfigure our design, because the design is predicated on parking for the townhomes off of that alley. If we are not permitted to park off of that alley by virtue of a negative vote, it's going to affect the design, meaning most of the townhomes will be flipped. We may need to eliminate some condos. I think we've made it perfectly clear to the neighborhood that the design will be less than ideal for both them and the project, meaning we designed the best possible design we could come up with to create as much green open space within the project and have permeability from the Scott Street development into the green open space we've designed. If we're forced to reconfigure our townhomes so that they're parked within the CLT parking, it's going to take green space away. There's likely to be a fence and no immediate access. And so I think that the neighborhood's going to do the right thing. But as Kai said, until we've gotten the vote in, we're a little on pins and needles and just keeping our fingers crossed.
I've got my fingers crossed for you. And I do appreciate you answering that question. So then can we assume that WGM is, still going to be good with this amount, or might there be an amendment to this request?
Jeff?
Thanks, Ruth. I can take that. Yeah, we've got the way that this estimate is structured. The alley could be located south of the property line, and our fees would hold. So we're covered in both cases here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, could you, I wonder if someone could pull up if we could pull up the drawing of the development. And Jeff, if you could just talk us through, so you don't have a pointer, so.
See, I don't have a pointer. I could share my screen if that.
Yeah, why don't you? And just show me what's what on that drawing.
You bet. All right, I'm gonna switch to I haven't shared yet. Switch to a slightly different version. Same master plan. It's just it has a little more granular detail. So this is the alley that we're referring to on the north property line.
Okay.
So that provides access, the permeability that Don discussed through the site to these open areas, and of course the large open area here. If that alley weren't in use, we'd essentially have a parallel and similar alley just south of that. The improvements being very similar in both cases.
Yeah, parking. Now I can see where all those parking spaces are and how critical they are to this design. Trying to find those in some other space would be difficult.
And then you're going to design Charlo and Shakespeare and Palmer, right?
Correct.
And there are also some improvements on Scott Street where we are adding sidewalk and boulevard and landscaping.
Okay.
And lighting?
Yes.
Yes, Scott Street and the configuration there is spelled out in the North Reserve Scott Street master plan. So what we included in our estimate for this, for our fee estimate, was the master plan improvements, which are landscaping strip, sidewalk, and then an additional landscaping area behind the sidewalk. We do have street lighting in the estimate as well.
Okay. And then what utilities?
So back to, let me switch back to this here. So utilities included in this estimate, of course, the storm drainage associated with the right-of-way streets, then the sewer and water mains, the mains only, not the service lines that serve.
Oh, and they're the green.
Yeah, so the dark green, the bold green that we're showing here are proposed sewer main extensions, and the blue are proposed water main extensions. And I don't know if you can see on this drawing, these dashed lighter lines are existing facilities. So really fortunate in a lot of ways that the existing infrastructure surrounding this site supports this development well. We have existing sewer and water right at the perimeter to extend onto the site. So there's not a lot of off-site work here. It's pretty efficient.
And one of the things that'll happen in the sequencing of this is that we'll go in, or they'll go in and put in the wet utilities first, so that we have hydrants in place that will then allow combustible construction to come out of the ground before the streets are completely finished. And we'll have to provide an access in there that's passable for the fire department to get equipment in there, which may be sub-base, maybe millings, or could even be the soil that's there now if it'll support a fire truck. And we'll do the geotechnical testing around that.
And Dawn, remind me the townhomes at the top of this graphic and down the side. are those will be the land trust?
Both the townhomes and the condos will be in the land trust, so everything you see on above the road where it says 40 stalls on it.
Oh,
will be in the
okay.
Community land trust.
Oh, that whole section.
Yes.
Okay.
Check this for some clarity.
Right. So everything on this map, I don't know if it's north or not, but everything above Charlotte Street, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we do need that alley, don't we?
Makes for an awful lot nicer design if we've got it. And
Yeah.
it's to Scott Street Village owners' advantage to do this, I think. Particularly with the partnership on maintaining the alley and snow removal and those sorts of things.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, Ruth.
yeah, I noticed on the graphic that was in the memo, well, you couldn't see each of those parking spaces. It does look like there would be trees planted within that parking area. And I think that's good. I also think it's good design to have some home ownership sort of buffer between the home ownership at Scott Street and the rental units beneath. It's kind of a nice transition there. I appreciate that. And finally, I'd like to say, Don, that I after reading the article in the Missoulian the other day, that the county's consultants, I think they were Echo Northwest, presented to the county on how difficult it is for private developers to do anything other than high-end development. I am glad that Good Works is determined to do projects like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We feel like we play development whack-a-mole on the regular, trying to solve problems, and that basically trying to get a development done is inherently a huge amount of money and commitment. And, we just really want to see this housing come online as soon as we possibly can get it there. And, we're hopeful to get a positive vote so that we don't get slowed down on having to do a redesign. And we're hopeful that we can, get concrete in the ground before it snows again this year.
So Jeff, you're confident that in the unlikely event that there is a negative vote, so let me say it that way, that the current estimates will allow you to redesign to accommodate the remassing of the project if necessary?
Yeah, the way that our estimate has been prepared, it's based on a lineal foot of roadway. So we have a certain dollar amount for each lineal foot of Charlotte, Shakespeare, Palmer, or the alley. Any redesign would be very unlikely to significantly change the overall lengths of those roadways and in relation to the utilities that are installed in them. So the orientation and location could shift, but I don't see a condition where there's any type of order of magnitude change to the lengths of roadways, which is what this is based on.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I mean, the big impact is going to be on penetration through the project and on green space.
And I think Ellen answered this, but just make sure I'm clear. The deliverable is design of the roads and utilities in documents that are ready to be bid?
No, it's through bidding.
Oh, it's through. It's through bidding.
Yes.
So we'll have the design complete so that it can be bid, and then Jeff will be available.
We'd have a certified bid tabulation and a recommendation of award as our final deliverable. So along with the construction documents.
Okay.
And the hope would be that would come back before us in the fall. Maybe that's a question to you, Ellen. I think you said September in the memo. Am I right about that?
I think that's the hope. And with everything else that's, with everything these days, permitting and the length of time it takes for permitting is going to be a factor, whether it's with the city or with the state for the utilities. So that could slow it down.
Yeah, not holding you to that. That's just
Yeah.
the hope. Yeah. Mhm.
It's a
Okay.
hope.
Okay, any other, yeah, Ruth?
Just one, and well, again, I appreciate the memo cover sheets. The project description on that clearly references Erd 3 and probably should be changed for the record.
Okay,
I'm not seeing that, but I'll find it.
Do you see, if you look at the cover member sheet, the memo cover sheet where it says project description, it looks like we're talking about the
Oh,
Erd 3.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay, just for the record, I think it should be corrected.
I piled it on top of another previous one.
Yeah, so, you know, yeah.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Nancy would be so proud of you, Ruth.
Well, what you didn't find is that I left out the word owned when I said units of permanently affordable homes, which will be privately, period.
No, I saw a couple of those things too. But those are not, you know, those are a little too picky even for me.
I knew what you meant.
Okay, any other questions? If not, is there a motion, let me just see, to approve the staff recommendation? I'm sorry, I was looking at the staff recommendations. I didn't hear or didn't
I'll
see.
move to approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Tasha.
I'll second.
Second, any public comment or any additional comments from the board?
Well, I'm not seeing anybody from the public with their hands raised. I'm going to put up the staff recommendation since we didn't read that out loud for those folks that are listening and not on video.
Oh, that's probably a good idea.
Not that this would help because this is video, but the staff, I think Ellen probably mentioned the staff recommendation in her review of her memo, but it is that the board approve a request from Rivara to provide funding for engineering proposal from WGM Group for design of the streets, utilities, and alley improvements per the letter of intent between the city of Missoula and Rivara in an amount not to exceed $316,527 and authorize MRA staff to make payments based on approved invoices and authorize the chair to sign the necessary agreements.
Okay, anything additional from anyone? Or public comment? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Dawn, Kaya, and Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all that you do.
And look forward to hearing what happens next. And why don't you, I don't know if somebody could let us know how your vote goes.
Oh, we will definitely circle back with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. What we have next is the 500 block of Burton Street. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's mine, Carl. Thank you.
And Todd, you're up.
Yeah. All right. Working on getting my screen up here so I can show some exhibits. All right, are we good to go?
We are, if you are.
I'm ready. Okay, so what we have today, again, before the board is the Burton Street right-of-way improvements, and I'm showing an exhibit here, which it kind of shows the extent of what we're referring to as the Burton Street right-of-way improvements. That would be curb and sidewalk, drainage improvements, and trail connection at the south terminus of Burton Street. And then we're also looking over on the east side for improvements to the approach to the footbridge that was installed as part of the West Broadway Island project, which is the east entrance basically to the West Broadway Island. And just kind of a quick recap of the events that lead to where we are today. These improvements in these two areas were part of the West Broadway Island project. And as the bids came in for that project, they were quite higher than anticipated, and some project scope was kind of reshuffled, and these improvements then were removed from the project to bring that project within the budget constraints for the West Broadway Island project. So then shortly after that, we had a developer, Alex Subrayan, who came before the board, and he has a redevelopment project on the south end, the west side of Burton, and he to build a apartment complex there. Part of his requirement then from the city was to build out the right-of-way improvements as part of his building permit. And he came before, that project came to the MRA board, and he was awarded TIF assistance for his demolition, deconstruction, and also TIF assistance for the right-of-way improvements. And the thinking at that time then was the basically the design that they had for the West Broadway Island would be folded into his project, and his contractor would then build out these right-of-way improvements on Burton Street. So as that process unfolded, there was some disagreement as to the design and of what the sidewalk should be on Burton Street adjacent to Mr. Subrayan's project. And in June, last June, then the project came before the MRA board with a request to enter into an agreement with Morrison Merrily, who was the project engineer on the West Broadway Island. And Morrison Merrily was essentially tasked with getting to a final design on the Burton Street right-of-way improvements. And by the time that worked through several discussions with various city departments and a meeting with Alex out on site, by the time we were able to reach a final design that would be approved by the city, it was a little too late in the construction season last year for Alex's contractor to get that work done. And so at this point, MRA staff determined that we'd like to modify Alex's development agreement and remove the right-of-way improvements from his development agreement. We'd like to take this on as a MRA sidewalk project and kind of deal with it more comprehensively. We've the design that Morrison Merrily completed and was approved has these two areas in it, so it's like we can address both sides of the project area here as an MRA project, and kind of comprehensively get that all completed. So in order to do that, we would need to further modify Morrison Merrily's professional services agreement so we could add in certain tasks and services to complete this as an MRA project, such as completing the bid documents and enhancing the construction administration and contract administration for construction oversight, and also to add in project closeout services for getting us to substantial completion and final completion and a 2-year warranty inspection down the road. So that is the amendment to that we're requesting today. Craig Schaefer has provided a proposal to MRA to add these services to the agreement at a cost not to exceed $9,700. And so I've had some discussions with Alex Subrayan over here, and I don't see that he is in the meeting today. And if he wasn't here, he wanted me to express his concerns with the design. He's still not in agreement with the design of the sidewalk there. Let me go to, well, here's the new apartment complex that Alex constructed on the west side of Burton Street. And the improvements will be a sidewalk, curb sidewalk through here and a trail connection down to the bridge and connecting to the sidewalk. And here's the construction drawing. It gets really cluttered because there's a lot of information on here, but I wanted to show you what the design that was approved by the city. So we got the north is on the left side of the drawing, south on the right, east on the top, and west on the bottom. And this is the new apartment complex that Mr. Sabrian constructed. This is the trail, north side riverfront trail coming down, and there'll be some gravel approaches then to the bridge over the ditch, and then this leads into the West Broadway Island. This will be the parking area that was developed, and this will be the sidewalk adjacent to the new apartment complex. And we'll be doing a little bit of sidewalk work on the other side of the street. So Alex wanted me to express what his concerns were with the drawing. And essentially they center around, the activity, some of the undesirable activity that the West Broadway Island has had a history of, and how that kind of spills over into this area. His concerns are based on safety then for his tenants here. He feels that people will congregate on the sidewalk here and continue to cause difficulty in that area. He's been a property owner in that area for many years. I believe he owns the hotel up here. And so he's got a lot of experience, a lot of observation of what goes on down here. So I can understand his concerns. However, in talking to him, it expressed to him that generally, not always, but as we make these improvements to an area, especially with his improvement down here, and the investment in this area really begins to transform what it has been and into a new area where the public can begin circulating through here, and we get more activity down there. Oftentimes that'll lead to a decrease in the undesirable activity in that area, although I can't guarantee that. So, we discussed that a bit, and so he's not particularly trying to oppose the project, but he wants his views read into the record. So that's why I want to describe what we had talked about. So with that said, it's MRA's intention then to move forward with this design here and construct this design as a MRA sidewalk project. Further thing I'd like to add is that Brian Hensel of the City Streets Department has generously offered and committed to doing the pavement for the project. And hopefully he'll provide the materials, labor, and equipment to do this. In talking with Brian, he wasn't sure how his material costs were going to come in this year. He said he'd try to cover it if he didn't think he could. MRA and Streets Department would enter into a memorandum of understanding, and MRA would purchase the materials for the paving, and Brian would provide the labor and equipment, which is still a really good way to spread out the costs. So that may come back further again to the board in the coming months if Brian doesn't feel he can cover all that cost. So, and the staff recommendation then today is that the board move to approve an amendment to the July 21, 2021 Morrison Merrily Professional Services Agreement in an amount not to exceed $9,700 for the additional professional services to complete the 500 block of Burton Street right-of-way improvements and the West Broadway Island East Footbridge approach as an MRA sidewalk project.
Thank you, Josh.
Any questions?
So go back to where you were, if you could, please. If I can start this off. What's his alternative to this?
Well, Mr. Sabrian, Alex would like to see first of all, that there's no sidewalk on the west side of Burton Street. And, we talked about that, and I just said that's not how the city constructs sidewalks on both sides of the street, where we have right of way width and there's not an obstruction to it. So he understands that. He would like to see that the sidewalk would be out. Can you see my pointer on the drawing? Okay. He would like to see the sidewalk out basically curbside next to the parking lot in order to get it further away from the building. And that was the big debate, curbside sidewalk or a boulevard sidewalk. The city standard for buildings constructing sidewalk is boulevard sidewalk, unless certain conditions can be met, which would justify an exemption to that rule. Those are usually a lack of right-of-way width or elevation differences, which make it unfeasible to construct a boulevard sidewalk, or mature landscaping to where we'd want to move the sidewalk to protect mature trees. None of those conditions are present out here, so the city is not going to issue an exemption to a boulevard sidewalk. And I mentioned to Alex that, looking at the drawing, it looks like me that there's been some concession or maybe compromise on how the city has run the sidewalk through here. Alex doesn't agree with that, but I think what they've done here is they pulled it away from the fence as much as they could, but still tried to maintain a minimum boulevard here that we can get some street trees planted in and still meet the sidewalk boulevard standards.
Go back to your photo.
Oops.
And where is it exactly? Oh, I see. So it's right there next to the fence. Is that right?
Yeah, it's about 3 feet, maybe 2 to 3 feet out from the fence, the back of the sidewalk. So there's a little bit of spacing between the back of the sidewalk and the fence. And then that fence is about 3 feet from the building. So I think there's about 6, maybe 7 feet between the back of the sidewalk and the building.
And what's on the left side of that picture?
Over here?
Yeah.
This is the Island Park Condominiums. And we'll be formalizing some 98-degree angle parking here and tying into some existing sidewalk here. So we'll be constructing sidewalk in front of the fence here. So 2 housing complexes on either side of the street, a boulevard sidewalk on the west side here, trail connections tying into the West Broadway Island Bridge here in a paved parking lot. So these poles and utilities remain here. They'll be located in the boulevard. So.
Okay, thank you. Ruth?
Yes, so the fence will remain in front of Mr. Spryan's apartments?
Correct, yes.
And will the boulevard have any landscaping, any tree planting?
It's called out for topsoil and seed for grass, and I was discussing that with Morrison Merrily this week, that we'll try to get 3 to 4 trees in the boulevard here, depending on how much spacing we have.
Yeah, to match the other side. And then also, what about lighting?
We don't have lighting as a component of this project, but there is the parking lot here for the apartment complex. You can see here is a light, and there's one on the other side of the parking lot here. I haven't been out there at night to really see. I imagine it's fairly dark down here, and some of this ambient light will spill down onto the sidewalk here. At this point, we don't. Go ahead.
The new parking area that would be just south of the Island Park condos, does that include lighting? That little parking area?
Down here?
Yeah.
No. No, we don't have street lighting as a component of the project.
Should we, given the safety concerns?
I wonder. I was thinking of that last night. depending on how you do it, you may get opposition from the people in the condos as they don't want to have lighting, so you come into that. But I think with with the lighting we see these days, which is really focused down, perhaps something we could consider, depending on what the board's prerogative. If we did, I think I would move forward. Well, we'd probably have to further amend the engineering contract to bring in electrical engineering in to get lighting in there. And I think we could move forward with bidding the project and then come back with it with a change order to add in a light pole or two. But I would assume that the Morrison Merrily would need an increase in their scope to do some what do they call it, street lighting level analyses, and then engineering electricity and a light down to there, which looks like we probably have power nearby.
So let me make a suggestion. I think that's a really valid point about the need for streetlights, particularly in this area. I've been down there around dusk and it can be a little scary. And I think we're doing everything we can to discourage the type of activity that we've seen taking place down there for several years. Why don't we move forward with the design of the streets and sidewalks and curb and gutter and landscaping, get a price from Morrison Merrily to look at what the options are for streetlights. And I mean, I think if we're going to do that, we need to put in the streetlights that we are using as our standard for the urban core, like we did at Scott Tool and like we've done on Higgins and other streets. So, and let's see what it looks like cost-wise and bring it back to the board next month. And that way they can still go ahead with getting this ready to bid in the coming months. And maybe there can be a separate bid for the lights, or maybe it can be incorporated at this point if they, but they'll have to do photometrics and that sort of thing. But we're using that standard fixture. We're using those standard luminaires. So the calcs are already out there.
But that doesn't, we're not working at cross purposes doing that. I mean, from a complete layperson standpoint, we're not going to be designing something we're going to have to rip up to put lights in.
No, I think that we would ask them to assume that lighting might be a part of this as they move forward with the surface design.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And
because you've got that boulevard, you're basically, the lights can be an extension of that.
Okay.
That gives you a lot more flexibility than you would have with curbside sidewalk, I think.
Right. Okay. Does that make sense, Ruth? Make sense to you?
And for that parking area, just Ellen, those luminaires are dark skies compliant, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, they're not. They're very different. They're very different from the Cobra head that's outside my bedroom window on Alder Street.
I had a Cobra head across. I had a Cobra head across the street for a long time, and it finally got changed. It made a big difference in how well I sleep at night.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So we can approve this with an understanding that we'd like somebody to look at the lighting issue as a possible addition to this, and also as a mitigation to the property owner's concern about safety and security.
Yeah.
And then if that does come to fruition, we'll hear more about it at a subsequent board meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to Craig Schaefer at Morrison Merrily about let's look at adding a lighting component, but for right now, let's keep the ball rolling to where we can get to bid.
Okay.
And as Ellen said, we maybe can either look at it as a change order or a bid alternative or something to where we can add it into the project as we go.
The other option is that if the cost of designing in the street lighting is less than $5,000, I could authorize that with the board,
Sure.
ability, and
Sure.
we don't have to wait for another board meeting to formalize that.
Sure.
Yeah, I really don't know what the estimate for a cost on that. So we have that option.
I mean, I can't imagine that it shouldn't be over 5,000, but who knows? I'm not an electrical.
Yeah, and then the other thing, of course, is being sensitive to what, I mean, there's gonna have to be some sort of public outreach there, because I think we do want to be sensitive to the people's concern about too much light.
Which is a valid concern.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I'd just like to make a comment that I think all of us are really sensitive to the concerns of this property owner about the safety issues. And I know, Todd, I'm sure you've discussed this with him, but if he were here, I'd want to tell him, and so I'm going to say it for the record, that all of the investment made in this island park area has been to improve the safety and security of that area and make this area usable and attractive to the general public. And that these improvements, while we absolutely understand his concerns, our hope is that they would achieve a solution to those concerns.
Part of the solution, certainly.
Part of the solution, and of course, no guarantees can ever be made. But I mean, I think that's been all of the intent here.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion, Alex and I, on that, and he's not real convinced that it will transition. I'm a little more optimistic that it will, and there's no guarantee, but it is definitely transitioning for the better on the south end of Burton Street there, no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's, I don't want to cut anybody off, but if there are no additional comments or questions, we have a motion. The staff recommendation was read to us. So do we have a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
Also move.
Okay, Melanie's moves. Is there a second?
I would ask that we amend that to the motion to include the analysis of adding lighting.
I would accept that. Chair, do you want me to try to read that as such?
Sure.
Gosh, I wouldn't have done the hard one, everybody. I'm just kidding. So staff recommends the board move to approve an amendment to the July 21st, 2021 Morrison Merrily Professional Services Agreement in an amount not to exceed $9,700 for the additional professional services to complete the 500 block of Burton Street right-of-way improvements in the West Broadway Island East Footbridge approach as an MRA sidewalk project, and include an analysis of public lighting. Is that the way to say it?
I would call them street lights.
And include an analysis of street lights on Burton Street. Does that do it?
I think there'll need to be like the understanding that we'd have to come back to the board if that is beyond the director's ability to approve that additional cost, because that's not in the scope that we're presenting today.
That's fine. We have that understanding. I mean, we're approving the 9,700, but we're going to want some looking at some streetlights. And if they have to come back and say, well, that's another 1,000 or that's another $6,000 more than Ellen can approve, then we'll have to approve that. But I think Tasha made an excellent point that I think we need to look at the lighting.
And it may be that if there is some concern from the residential properties about the impact of normal street lighting, maybe we look at putting a couple of fixtures at the end of Burton Street where you transition to the trail and to the island and not try to light the whole street.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. With that, does everyone understand the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Leslie or Jill?
Carl, I don't have any public members with their hands raised to comment.
Okay. All right. All right, then all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. We'll
And
look into that electrical lighting.
All right. All right, the BN Professional Services Agreement, huh?
Yep. Now we get the fun one.
Now we get to delve in.
Yeah,
Have we done the full FBI background report on this guy?
Oh, yeah.
Better. You don't know what I've been up to the last 6 months.
Yeah, but I think the last one was done 34 or 30. What was it? How many years ago?
Almost 35.
35 years ago. So we may need an update on that. But we'll come to that. Ellen, do you want to present your proposal here to?
Yeah, and I'll preface my report by saying that I got an email from Nancy this morning saying I won't be at the meeting today, but I'm very pleased that Chris Bean may continue his association with MRA through this professional services agreement. So there's an endorsement. I mean, the long and short of it is that we're swamped as a staff, there's no let up in sight. Projects are getting bigger and more complex as we dream bigger. And Chris decided to retire right smack in a pandemic where you can't do any of the things that you would normally do in retirement. So it seemed like an opportune time to see if he had any interest in coming back on a contract basis and jumping in and helping us out. I will tell you that our new deputy director, Annie, will start March 1st, but that's still a month and a half away. And we could really use some help. And so what we've got in front of you is a pretty standard professional services agreement where Chris has gone ahead and created an LLC and had lunch with too many attorneys at Warden's on Fridays. And
Who all told me, just do it yourself. You don't want to have us do it.
but you got lots of advice, I'm sure. So anyway, it seems pretty straightforward to me. We've worked through it with the city attorney. He's happy with it. So we've got a recommendation in front of you that, and you know what this does is it sets a process in place. It sets an hourly rate of $60 an hour plus material costs, and it caps at 960 hours within any given calendar year for purposes of his retirement through the state retirement system. If he exceeds that, then there's some repercussions of some kind. So wouldn't exceed that without written mutual agreement by MRA and BN Development Services, LLC. Or Chris.
Say that the rate is based on basically what I was making as a wage plus benefits as of last June.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I would just like to point out, I think that Ellen mentioned this in her memo, but I would like to reiterate then that even though the new employee, Annie Gursky, will start on March 1st, there will be some learning curve for her. And I'm glad that Chris will be there to help with that, as well as to help with projects, and that this services agreement could, will remain in effect in case we need help in the future on specific projects. So I think it looks like a good deal.
For us.
Yeah.
Chris, you want us to vote against this?
No.
You tell me to vote no.
It's a
I
little
will
frightening,
vote no.
honestly. I've kind of gotten used to this life of just sort of floating along and but no, I would like to have something that's challenging every day and or from time to time or whatever it turns out to be. And I think this will work out okay. think
We
I
appreciate
think
your-
that there's
your
some
willingness.
projects out there, listening to the projects today, you know, they were mostly, for the most part, very familiar. So, I mean, I talked to the SIPPs before they started. I talked to, you know, and I really appreciate Todd's taken on that really complicated stuff down there on Burton. That thing has never been easy, and I know Alex is tough, and I certainly understand these issues. And same with South, you know, doing the work with Don and Kai. That's another one that's just really tough. So I think won't take too much of a learning curve to jump in where needed. The agreement also says that Ellen gets to specify what it is that I'm going to working on.
And it says we can terminate you at any time. So, you know.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So you're.
Or I can terminate you at
Or
any
you can terminate us.
You know, I think the challenge is going to be to limit it and to focus Chris's efforts.
Well, and
I've already got
think
my list.
I think Ellen and Chris are up to that challenge. So, anything else? If not, is there, let me see, the staff recommendation is to approve a professional services agreement to engage Behan Development Services LLC pursuant to the terms of the draft agreement that we've been given. Is there a motion to that effect?
One little correction there. It's BN Development Consulting, LLC.
Okay.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
I'll second it.
Melanie seconded. Any further comments?
With deep gratitude.
Right.
Well, I hope to live up to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
No comments from the public, Carl.
Okay. I thought, Chris, you'd get the boys from Warden to all phone in and
They must not have heard about it.
we get a comment from that crowd. We don't need that, do we?
No, we don't. Need that. No, thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Happily, aye.
Yes. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Chris, thank you very much for helping us out, and look forward to seeing you and your bright, shiny face again.
Well, I do have a vested interest in trying to make sure some of these things happen. It's
All right.
so glad I don't have to do it as a volunteer.
There we go. All right, moving on to director's report. Anything that you want to add to the director report?
No, I don't think so. It's all pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any questions, Alan, on the director's report? Budget status reports. Joe, anything that you wanted to unusual here to call to our attention, or any questions from the board on the budget status reports?
Let's see. Hopefully everybody's looking at them now. The budget status reports are through December. So we had some debt service activity. It takes a little longer because we have all of debt service payments are taken care of, by January 1 and July 1. So you'll see some activity under the debt service category. Just take a look. We did let's see, anything update on Front Street? No, you'll see the debt service in there. Because I'm showing this, and this is more on easier to read format, there's just a lot of behind the scenes back and forth on figuring the debt service. What you're seeing here on these reports is actually what we expended for our debt service payments. Those come right out of the general ledger. Sometimes our transfers, obviously, we're supposed to transfer tax increment when we get it. And so our debt service payments that are made on the expenditure side are not necessarily 1/2 of our debt service for the year. Sometimes you have principal and interest equally split out January 1 and July 1, and sometimes it's just an interest payment. So just a little bit of quirkiness there on that end. But I will tell you that I tie it out on the back end to cash. And so it just takes me a little bit longer with the new format. Wanted to point out in ERD 2 that we had the reprogramming of the Ponderosa Village project. That project essentially, kind of fell through due to COVID. And so the developer withdrew their application. And I think they have another project in mind for that site, but if they would like to apply for TIF assistance, Todd has advised them that they need to reapply if they're going to do a different project. So that money has been taken out of the committed column, and then of course it's reprogrammed down into your contingency number. For 3, you can see we have of course first batch of revenue coming in, and then our debt service requirements. And for the public's benefit, it's this yellow line, which is our uncommitted contingency funds that the board looks at when considering project approval. Here's our North Reserve Scott Street revenues, what we've paid out in debt service, funds available, and then activity. And then finally, our Hellgate. This is the only district that we do not have bonds issued. So though you see there is no debt service requirements. And that's essentially all I have for that. Unless you have questions.
Any questions for Jill? Okay, Alan?
I have a comment. The number that you see in Urban Renewal District 3 is a pretty healthy uncommitted balance. And, I want to point out that if the Brooks Corridor project moves forward, and there are a lot of reasons to think that it may well do that, just by virtue of the fact that we were awarded that entire planning grant that we requested, we got the entire request. We know we're going to have a significant match to be able to get federal transit or raise funds or some of these other infrastructure funding pots that are part of the most current bill. So while that might look excessive, if you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, it's not excessive at all. If we're successful in doing that whole project and doing it the way we have it envisioned right now, we're going to need a $10 to $20 million match to be competitive, because we've got, in excess of a $50 million project, well in excess of a $50 million project out there that totally transforms that area.
Okay.
So just a little context there for any of the public that might be listening and thinking about.
I appreciate that comment. I would hope that doesn't preclude other projects from being funded in the meantime. So.
Oh, we got lots of stuff we're stirring around with.
Good.
Okay. All right.
That would require bonding, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry?
I mean, we would be evaluating large bonds for that project, right?
Yes.
I mean, I share Ruth's concern and comment, which is there is great opportunity for additional development beyond just the street project, which is significant. And I would hope that we would be leveraging as much as we can to allow for greater opportunities.
And we have a very large bonding capacity in that district.
Okay. Anything else?
One thing I did not mention with respect to the Scott Street project is we will probably look at taking a reimbursement resolution to council so that when bonds are issued for the construction of those streets, we can go back and pick up the engineering cost and free up cash in that district. We don't technically have to do that because it's engineering cost, but it's not a bad thing to keep these projects in the public eye and in front of council. So I think I'm going to opt to go ahead and take a reimbursement resolution to them in the coming weeks.
Sure.
So you do that before Bond, before the bonds itself?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
We've
okay.
done that on almost all of the projects that are self-initiated or that we're
Do you
paying.
do it before we incur the expense even?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to because it's engineering, and as long as it doesn't exceed a certain percentage, like 20% of the construction cost, you can wrap it into the bonds without going through this. But this makes it public. It states the council's intent, and just gets it in front of the public one more time.
So it just says if this thing goes through and their bonds issued, we're gonna recoup these engineering costs, right?
That's correct.
Okay, but would still be subject to approval of the bond resolution.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, you always do this out in front of the
Huh.
bond.
Well, you learn something every day about things you've been doing for 20 years.
Something to keep in mind, Chris.
All right, anything else? I have one thing, which is just FYI, we meeting again, I think next Monday. City, MRA, council, that thing. Yeah, so that's still moving along. And then we got an email from Leslie today with some examples, or with an example of, I presume this is stuff that is going on the web page, or is going on the web page, or and what were we supposed to do something with that?
So Carl, I can speak to that. So this is essentially really close to the final draft of our communication piece that we contracted with Spider to do. We had asked her to prepare just what is TIF piece, and then a real simple projects that we've been involved in, and a kind of an example piece and so what has happened is they ended up originally 2 pieces, we thought, and then they kind of came together. We felt it was important to have 2 pieces. And so the final piece is a digital designed piece. So it looks good in a digital format that can go on the website. So it reads top to bottom. And then it can also be printed. And so when it's finalized, we will send it over to Alpha Graphics and have it produced for us. And it'll be like, I think it's a trifold type of thing. And so we wanted to present this to the board. So Leslie did email it out to you. So you, if you had any comments, you get a chance to look at it so far and had any comments on it that you want to either give to us now in this format, or if you want to email us. But we want to we're right down to the end, and we just have one little area that we'd like to tweak. If you want me to share my screen and we can kind of take a look at it briefly. It is not on the website. Like I said, it's still this is our kind of final draft. Shrink it down a little bit. It uses kind of a river type concept to show the property tax original revenue line before a district is formed. And it reads, of course, follow the numbers with little pop outs. Haven't had a chance to really look at the graphics in detail because we're really mainly focusing on the text. But the graphics are nice. And you can see here's a blighted area. And then when a district is formed, the revenue streams kind of split. Whereas the original stream continues to go to the taxing jurisdictions. But we have this smaller stream over here where we start building additional tax increment after, as more projects become completed in the district, and really explains what we do for the projects, how the TIF component is focused on the public improvements of a project. And I won't read everything out loud, but then as you can see, the 2 streams, the tax increment stream starts to grow and grow. And eventually at the end of the district, they come back together, and all of the revenue then goes to the taxing jurisdictions, of which the city, county, and the school districts are the top 3. Here's the split. That's the first side of the printed They will flow like this on the website, obviously. And this, I think we anticipated putting up on the Engage Missoula site also. So this is the kind of the project side of the piece. Talks about how we prioritize the projects based on overall city and community goals. We really wanted to make sure that that's a focus, that those goals are, you know, established by the city in the strategic plan. And then here's where we went through our projects and picked an example. There's a housing example, economic vitality, public buildings, public infrastructure, and historic preservation, and parks and trails. So before and after pictures showing MRA investment and total investment, if there's a private developer involved, if it's a public-private partnership, or obviously just our investment alone, if it's a strictly public improvement project. Ellen, did you want to add anything? Are there any questions from the board or comments at this time?
Ruth,
If I'll wait for Ellen's comments if she wants.
The only comment that I have is that if you happen to be downtown around dusk on a week evening, go past the Union Block building. It's unbelievable with the lighting coming from the offices and the windows, the new windows. I mean, it'll make you really proud. It's the best looking building in downtown now, in my opinion. But I walked by there leaving a meeting at Downtown Association last week and walked down front, and I was just like, I was floored. I mean, it looks great in the middle of the day, but right around dusk when those offices are still lit, and you know, it's pretty impressive.
Ruth, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I have a few comments, but listening to Ellen reminded me that there were a couple of times when we did presentations for the Citizens Academy, and Ellen would always reach a point where she said, "This is my favorite project." And it's like, really, they're all my, I look at those projects and I'm proud of every one of them. I like that we chose a small business, and I hope that the public realizes that we do love to hear from small local businesses and help them, like the Trailhead, like the Sippy's art buildings. I also really like the river metaphor that you have going on there. And I think it's clear from a couple of those little boxes that we do have to rely on those private developments in order to generate the tax revenue to fund the public projects. So I think that's pretty clear in there, and I appreciate that a lot. So I think this is really well done, and I'm curious, Jill, what you would tweak.
There's actually just between Ellen and I going back and forth just in the last 24 hours on Spider's final draft, just some additional things that we felt that were important to highlight. For example, on the MRL site, we have the park, but there were TIF funds not only, you know, for the construction of the park and the trail, but as Ellen realized, you know, we didn't include the acquisition. TIF funds were used to acquire that property and to remediate that property, and we felt like that was really, really important. And there was another section that it might have been this one right here, number 5, that we're looking at. Environmental remediation wasn't in there as one of the things that we do, and I felt that that was super important because we do quite a bit of it. And there's a project right now that's pending for West Broadway that, you know, the developer he's about to purchase the property and found out that there's potential tanks underground. And so now, you know, everything comes to a screeching halt, and developers are ready to walk away because that's an expense that they can't take on. So I felt that was important that we get that in there. So we need to just change a couple things on that Emerald Park narrative just to make sure that all those things are included.
Okay, that reminds me that we also talked quite a bit about sustainability and equity, and I think that the project page identifies that pretty well, and it is mentioned there. I don't know if you can emphasize that anymore, but I don't know if it's critical either because it is there.
Yeah, and those come directly from the city's strategic plan as community goals.
And we tried to be deliberate about the projects that we chose to spotlight, and a lot of them really are wrapped in that whole livability, sustainability, and equity.
Yeah.
you know, those concepts, whether it's the income qualified housing, or the new parks and trails.
Yeah, and we know that, we're familiar with that as board and staff.
Yeah.
I asked my husband to look at it, and while he's not unfamiliar with the MRA, obviously, he agreed that it's really well put together, and he commented on the river metaphor too, that is something that I think will really resonate with the whole community.
I just,
Oh, go ahead, Melanie.
I'm excited to share it. So when it's this is not the version you want shared, right? Or is it shareable? No. When it's completely done, will you resend it so we could send it to people?
I think we're close.
Thank you.
Do we
I just
get,
wanted to add that I thought the graphics were very thoughtful. So not just the use of the river, which I love, both because it fits Missoula and the analogy is really helpful. But I mean, streetlights and trails and buses and roundabouts. And I mean, the more you look at the graphics, the more meaningful it becomes. So I appreciated that.
Some of the buildings I thought looked really familiar.
do we get the template for the page 2 so that we can update it?
Yeah, I'm sure that could be.
I mean, the problem I have with things like this is not, I mean, I think this is really well done and all of that. I agree with everyone's comments on that. The problem I have is that it sits on the webpage for months or years and it doesn't get updated. It'd be nice to, if we could simply periodically plug different projects into page 2. And it may make a page 3 or page 4 or page 5 and just.
It gets too messy. I like 2 pages.
Well, or yeah, but anyway, the examples get old. It'd be nice if we could just, I mean, as part of this, understand our continuing duty to communicate as new things as they come along.
Well, I mean, I think it'd be easy enough to take that second page and every couple of years substitute different projects in there.
Right. That's
I think
all
it
I'm
would
saying.
also be kind of interesting to see if there's a way, as projects come out of the ground, if page 1 doesn't get some changes that reflect those new types of projects.
Well,
Yeah, maybe it's too complicated, but if Riverfront Triangle pops and suddenly you've got a hotel with condos on top and a 6,000 cap performance venue, find somewhere on the river to show that new addition to
yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, that was my only comment. Just
Great feedback.
okay. All right. Anything else then? If not, let me look at the agenda. Are we good?
I think we're good.
We're good. All right. Well, thank you all again. And again, our hopes for meeting in person. And I know there'll be stuff published, but Ellen, if you could, or staff, keep us advised of.
I mean, we've basically got everybody working from home except me at this point.
But also, if you keep us advised of what if there's other things we can do for Nancy.
Leslie sent me a text saying that there was a small obituary picture posted, just a death notice on Garden City. It looks like Garden City is handling the arrangements. And I just went out there and there's nothing out there yet, but we will certainly keep you posted on that.
All right. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Welcome back, Chris.